Hey everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan, and the podcast as always is brought to you by my sponsors. That includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops, and also brought to you by Master Packager, an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. That time of the month once more, it was Patch Tuesday this week. And with this month, Microsoft patched 137 flaws with this month's Windows updates, including one publicly disclosed zero-day vulnerability in SQL Server. A total rundown of the vulnerabilities patch for this month included 53 elevation of privilege vulnerabilities, quite a high number, 8 security feature bypass vulnerabilities, 41 remote code execution vulnerabilities, 18 information disclosure vulnerabilities, 6 denial of service vulnerabilities, and 4 spoofing vulnerabilities. 137 is getting up there in the number of vulnerabilities patched, so this does have the potential to be a quite disruptive month. I won't go through every vulnerability, of course, because there's simply not enough time, but the publicly disclosed zero-day was CVE-2025-49719, and this is the Microsoft SQL Server Information Disclosure vulnerability. This could allow a remote, unauthenticated attacker to access data from uninitialized memory. Microsoft stated improper input validation in SQL Server allows an unauthorized attacker to disclose information over a network. Admins can fix the flaw by installing the latest version of Microsoft SQL Server and by installing the Microsoft OLE DB driver 18 or 19. Of course, other vendors also released their own patches and security advisories in line with Patch Tuesday, such as the likes of Adobe, Cisco, and more. Speaking of vulnerabilities disclosed by other vendors, a vulnerability has been identified that impacts a virtual delivery agent for Windows used by Citrix virtual apps and desktops and Citrix DAS. The vulnerability affects the VDA versions before 2503 and the long-term service release versions of 2402 LTSR CU2 and earlier versions of 2402. They stated that version 2203 LTSR is not affected by the vulnerability. And the vulnerability in question is CVE-2025-6759, which is a local privilege escalation vulnerability that allows low-privileged users to gain system privileges. Citrix strongly recommends that customers upgrade their VDA for single-session OS to versions that contain fixes as soon as possible. And if you can't roll out that updated version, there is a workaround. There's a DWORD registry value that you can set to 0. So you could likely just do that in the short term and then roll out the updated VDA as part of your maintenance cycle, I guess. They suggest you could use Citrix WEM to deploy the registry key. Likewise, you could probably use something like Control Up Automated Actions to set it. You could use something like Group Policy or whatever is convenient. Forbes reported that Windows 11 users are experiencing issues with a firewall configuration error when using Windows Firewall with Advanced Security, and this is following the June Windows Update KB 5060829. On this issue, Microsoft have confirmed that there's an event viewer error 2024 referring to a config read failed with the message of more data is available. The error is triggered every time the Windows device is restarted, according to Microsoft. The good news is that Microsoft said that this error can be safely ignored, as it does not reflect an issue with Windows Firewall, and the error is reported to be related to a feature that is currently under development and has not been fully implemented. So this is the second time this year that there's been an error caused by a Windows update where customers are advised that, it's just a false negative, don't worry about it, move on. Presumably they're going to address this and suppress the error in future. Microsoft confirmed an issue in the security baseline update process where during upgrades from specific versions, customizations are not automatically being retained. Instead, values are replaced with the default recommended values contained in the latest releases. And it impacts baseline upgrades for the security baseline for Microsoft Edge version 112 to version 128, security baseline for Windows 10 and later version 23H2 to version 24H2, Windows 365 security baseline November 2021 to version 24H1, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Security Baseline, version 6 to version 24H1, and Microsoft 365 Apps for Enterprise Security Baseline, version 2206 to version 2306. When updating these security baselines, Intune creates a duplicate policy and automatically populates Microsoft's recommended settings for the new version. These default configurations can be edited to apply customizations. However, customizations are not automatically carried over from the previous version when updating, and admins will need to manually apply the customizations when creating the new profile, according to the advisory from Microsoft. They also stated that the Intune team will be delivering an update to automate migration of the impacted security baselines in an upcoming release. So a heads up, if you are rolling out a update for your security baselines, make sure you have your existing settings as a reference and reset those in the new versions. Bit of a mess, quite frankly. The Citrix Bleed 2 vulnerability that Citrix said was not being exploited last week, while a security research firm had been reporting that they did find evidence of it being exploited last week, now has more published exploits and other corroborating security researchers saying that it is indeed being actively exploited. In technical analysis, first released by Watchtower and also then by Horizon 3, researchers confirmed that the vulnerability can be exploited by sending an incorrect login request where the login equals parameter is modified so it's sent without an equal sign or value, allowing exploit. Interestingly, on their part, Citrix is still claiming that there is no sign of this being actively exploited, while various different security researchers are stating that it is being exploited. And now, the fact that there's some exploits being published publicly, they say on average, when there's an exploit published, that cyber gangs start leveraging it on average within 7 days. Well, soon I think they'll be admitting that it is being exploited in attacks because stats suggest that it will. Microsoft has announced that Windows PowerShell version 2, which is deprecated, has now been removed from the latest insider preview builds flighted to the Canary channel. Microsoft stated that more information will be shared in the coming months on the removal of Windows PowerShell 2 in an upcoming update of Windows 11. So if you're still rocking PowerShell 2 and leveraging it for your work, it's now time to move. On last week's episode of the podcast, I covered an interesting report from ControlUp about the uptake, or in some cases lack thereof, of Windows 11 in Enterprise. Well, the latest Stack Counter monthly numbers shows Windows 11 is now at 50.24%, with Windows 10 at 46.84%. So Windows 11 is finally climbing that hill and getting past Windows 10. It's already the case, reportedly, that Windows 11 has surpassed Windows 10 in certain regions, but it seems like now overall with Stack Counter's large pool of data that Windows 11 is the majority holder. Marks & Spencer confirmed that their network was initially breached in a sophisticated impersonation attack that ultimately led to a Dragon Force ransomware attack. So, not new information, like sophisticated impersonation attack is essentially admission that it was social engineering. But what is new is they're confirming that this was a ransomware attack by Dragon Force. While BleepComputer.com was told that data was stolen in the attack, Dragon Force has not made an entry on their data leak site for M&S. And this could indicate, they say, that the retail chain paid a ransom demand to prevent the leaking of stolen data. Now, when asked about the ransom demands during hearings, Archie Norman, the chairman for M&S, said they took a hands-off approach when dealing with the threat actors, saying, quote, "We took an early decision that nobody at M&S would deal with the threat actors directly. We felt that the right thing would be to leave this to the professionals who have experience in the matter." End quote. When explicitly asked if they paid a ransom demand, Norman said they were not discussing these details publicly as they, quote, don't think it's in the public interest, end quote. It sure sounds like they paid a ransom. It'll be interesting to see if that comes out publicly in the next few weeks. We'll have to wait and see. TechRadar reported that two vulnerabilities first introduced in 2013 were recently spotted in various Linux distributions, which reportedly, when chained together, allow local attackers to escalate the privileges and thus run arbitrary files using sudo. The vulnerabilities are tracked as CVE-2025-32462 and CVE-2025-32463. Interestingly, the former only had a 2.8 out of 10 on the severity scale, so you may just overlook it. But when chained together with the latter vulnerability, which has a 9.3 out of 10 critical score on the severity rating, it has devastating effects. All versions before 1.9.17p1 were reported to be vulnerable, and Linux users are advised to apply available patches and make sure their Linux desktop distributions are generally updated, which is a good rule of thumb. And of course, don't be foolish in thinking that somehow macOS, Linux, or different operating systems are somehow more secure, therefore don't need to be patched as quickly or readily as your Windows systems. All OSs, all systems should be patched in a timely manner. According to bleepcomputer.com, a hacker is threatening to leak 106 gigs of data allegedly stolen from Spanish telecommunications company Telefónica in a breach that the company did not acknowledge. The threat actor has leaked a 2.6 gig archive that unpacks into 5 gigabytes of data with a little over 20,000 files to prove that the breach occurred. The breach allegedly occurred on May 30th, and the hacker claims they had 12 hours of uninterrupted data exfiltration before defenders revoked access. The hacker claiming responsibility for the attack is known as Ray, and is a member of the Hellcat ransomware group responsible for another breach at Telefónica in January through an internal Jira development and ticketing server. Ray told Bleep Computer that they exfiltrated 385,311 files, totaling the 106.3 gigs of size. The data reportedly includes tickets, emails, purchase orders, internal logs, customer records, and employee data. They said that the May 30th breach was possible because of a Jira misconfiguration after the company dealt with the previous compromise. Some of the files included invoices to business clients in countries such as Hungary, Germany, Spain, Chile, and Peru. The most recent file that bleepcomputer.com saw from the breach was 2021. So this is a story that could likely develop further in the few weeks ahead because at this time it seems like Telefónica is not being very public about it, but certainly this Ray character is. FSLogix version 2506 is now generally available, and with this version they bring support, data roaming, and application registration for Microsoft Outlook for Windows, the MSIX version. They've enabled special handling for the registration of MSIX package family in both profiles and ODFC, supports redirections of the application data for ODFC containers, and also allows coexistence between Classic and Outlook for Windows under a single configuration setting. My employer and show sponsor, Numescent, recently launched new features in Cloudpager, which is the cloud-native container management platform mentioned at the top of each show. The new features include app dependencies, where you can link or set app dependencies for your application containers within Cloudpager. So when you add them to a work pod to publish and deploy the applications to employees, it will automatically deploy or add the app dependencies to the work pod too. You can also set incompatibilities. So if you know some applications should not go together, you can link incompatible applications so they're not being deployed together. Also released was PowerShell script policies, which allow you to create PowerShell scripts and associate or assign those with work pods to apply basically any configuration in user mode or in system context. So essentially, you're having those work pods that are logical groupings of applications being dynamically deployed to your employees on their desktop sessions, but you can also have scripts execute with the work pods too. So essentially, it's almost like workspace as a code. All the applications and all the configurations dynamically delivered on demand or dynamically on a set interval. And I'll share links to those announcements with this episode, which is episode 394, if you want to read more about it and check out the demo videos for yourself. And you'll find that at 5bytespodcast.com. BleepingComputer.com reported that ChatGPT Deep Research is getting support for new connectors or integrations, including for Slack. Once integrated, ChatGPT can crawl your Slack messages and use them in the context of research. It's unclear at this time if OpenAI has teamed up with Slack or if the company is just relying on Slack APIs, which BleepingComputer.com suggests have several limitations. But it'll be interesting to see if they expand this and include further integrations with Deep Research going forward. Business Insider had a great report on Morgan Stanley, who have developed their own internal AI tool, which they're using for updating their legacy code, and it's called devgen.ai internally. They shared that in early 2024, they pulled some of their top distinguished engineers at the firm out of their line of business teams and into a new applied AI team. The bank says it has saved almost 300,000 hours this year alone, but won't be replacing developers' jobs. In fact, Morgan Stanley has 233 technology jobs in the Americas alone posted on its website at the time of this recording, and that includes dozens of openings for software engineers. So further validates previous stories of some companies who are actually investing in hiring around AI technologies rather than using AI to remove the need for hiring. And in less hopeful and optimistic Gen AI related news, at the time of this recording on Tuesday night, there were a bunch of reports and posts from Twitter, or X, about Grok, which is Twitter's AI thingy, XAI or whatever it's called, started responding with some very strange, quirky messages, calling itself a Mecha Hitler. All kinds of stuff about PC nonsense, wokeness, dropping truth bombs and all kinds of nonsense. Which it's interesting because years ago, before Gen AI became this kind of mainstream sensation with ChatGPT, Microsoft and others had developed what they were claiming was AI, and within days of the services being launched, they resorted to all kinds of crazy, hateful slurs and stuff like that online with people who engage with them. And it seems like whatever change was made recently or last night by XAI led to its service Grok doing something quite similar. Honestly, having used things like Claude Sonnet, ChatGPT, Copilot, and trying Grok, I don't really rate Grok all that well. It seems like one of the weaker Gen AI services or models out there. And quite frankly, if it's being fed off of data on Twitter, then there's a lot of crap on Twitter. So garbage in, garbage out. But now, this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. Short and sweet again this week, the awesome Jen Gentleman shared a tip. If you hold Control, it pauses Task Manager so the processes don't move around when you're sorting by resource usage. So some people get very frustrated when they're trying to troubleshoot something and they're investigating, a process that's spiking resources. Well, hit Control to pause, and it gives you a little time to investigate and see what's going on. But that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening.